My own millionaire son looked me in the eyes and said, "Dad, I can't help pay for your surgery. I have my own life to think about." Those words hurt far more than the illness slowly destroying my body. My name is Thomas, and I am 70 years old. My wife, Mary, passed away 8 years ago, leaving me to face life alone. We had 2 children, Daniel and Emily. As parents, we never treated one child differently from the other. We worked hard, skipped vacations, and sacrificed countless dreams to give them the best education we could afford. Daniel was always ambitious. After college, he started a technology company that eventually made him a millionaire. Emily chose a different path. She became an elementary school teacher because she believed changing children's lives was more valuable than chasing money. I was proud of both of them, even though their lives had taken very different directions. After retiring from my job as a bus driver, I lived quietly in the small family home that Mary and I had spent 40 years paying for. I never asked my children for money because I believed parents should support their children, not the other way around. Everything changed when I started feeling constant pain in my chest. At first, I ignored it, thinking it was simply old age. But after collapsing while shopping one afternoon, I was rushed to the hospital. The doctors ran several tests before giving me news I never expected. I needed heart surgery within the next few weeks. Without it, my condition would become life. Although my insurance covered part of the cost, I still needed to pay a large amount that was far beyond my savings. That evening, I sat alone in my hospital room staring at the estimate in my hands. For the first time in my life, I felt completely helpless. The next morning, I called both of my children and asked them to visit. I wasn't asking them to solve all my problems. I simply hoped my family would stand beside me during the hardest moment of my life. I had no idea that the conversation waiting for me would test not only my heart, but also the love of my own children. Daniel arrived at the hospital wearing an expensive suit, talking on his phone about business deals. Emily came a few minutes later, carrying a small bag filled with homemade soup, fresh fruit, and my favorite sweater because she knew hospitals were always cold. After the doctor explained that I needed surgery soon, I quietly looked at my son. I said, "Daniel, I never wanted to ask you for money, but I don't have enough savings. Could you help me pay for the surgery? I'll repay you however I can." Daniel stayed silent for a moment before sighing. Then he calmly said, "Dad, I wish I could help, but I have too many financial commitments. I just bought a new vacation home, invested in another company, and my money is tied up. I can't afford to give away that much right now." I stared at him in disbelief. I knew his new sports car alone had cost more than my surgery. Still, I didn't argue. I simply nodded and whispered, "I understand." Inside, however, my heart shattered. It wasn't the money that hurt me. It was realizing that the little boy I had once carried on my shoulders now saw me as less important than his luxury lifestyle. After Daniel left, the room became completely quiet. Emily moved her chair closer to my bed and gently held my hand. Tears filled her eyes as she softly said, "Dad, I'm so sorry." I smiled and told her not to worry because I knew she didn't earn much as a teacher. But before I could say anything else, she reached into her purse and placed a small envelope on the bedside table. Inside were bank papers and a savings passbook. Emily quietly said, "Dad, I've been saving for 6 years to buy my first home. It isn't much, but it's enough to cover your surgery. A house can wait. I only have one father." My hands began to shake as I looked at her. I immediately pushed the envelope back and refused to accept it. "No, sweetheart," I said, my voice trembling. "You've worked too hard for this dream. I can't take it from you." Emily smiled through her tears and hugged me tightly. Then she whispered the words I will never forget. "Dad, you spent your whole life building my future. Now let me protect yours." In that moment, I realized that true wealth is not measured by the size of a bank account. It is measured by the size of a person's heart. I spent the entire night thinking about Emily's offer. Every time I looked at the savings book on the bedside table, I imagined all the years she had worked extra tutoring classes, skipped vacations, and lived in a small rented apartment just to save enough for her dream home. I simply could not let her sacrifice everything she had worked for because of me. The next morning, I handed the envelope back to her and gently said, "Emily, your mother and I spent our lives helping you build your future. I won't destroy your dream now." Emily tried to argue, but I smiled and shook my head. Just then, my cardiologist entered the room. He quietly explained that delaying the surgery much longer would be dangerous. I nodded, pretending to be calm, but inside I felt terrified. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of leaving my daughter with the pain of knowing she couldn't save me. That evening, Emily quietly shared our story with a close friend at the school where she taught. She never asked anyone for money. She simply needed someone to talk to because she was heartbroken. Her friend happened to know a local newspaper reporter who wrote a small article about a retired father who had sacrificed everything for his children and a daughter willing to give up her dream home to save his life. Within hours, the story spread across social media. Thousands of people were touched by Emily's selfless love. Messages of support poured in from complete strangers. The hospital received phone calls from people asking how they could help. I had no idea any of this was happening until the hospital director walked into my room the next morning with a smile on his face. He looked at me and said, "Mr. Thomas, I think you should know that your daughter's love has inspired an entire community. Something extraordinary is about to happen." My eyes filled with tears, but I still had no idea that the biggest surprise was yet to come. The next morning, I was taken to the hospital conference room. I expected another discussion about my surgery, but instead, I found several doctors, nurses, and members of a local charity waiting for me. The hospital director smiled warmly and said, "Mr. Thomas, after hearing your daughter's story, people from across the community wanted to help. A local foundation has agreed to pay every remaining cost of your surgery." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Emily stood beside me with tears streaming down her face. I hugged her tightly and whispered, "This happened because of your kindness, not because we asked for help." A few hours later, my surgery was successfully completed. When I opened my eyes in the recovery room, the first person I saw was Emily holding my hand. She had stayed there the entire time, praying and waiting for the doctors to bring me back safely. A few days later, Daniel finally came to visit. He looked different. The confidence he once carried had disappeared. He quietly sat beside my bed and said, "Dad, I read everything people wrote about Emily. I realized that while I was protecting my money, she was protecting her father. I was ashamed of myself." For the first time in years, my successful millionaire son looked like the little boy who knew he had made a terrible mistake. After I recovered, life slowly returned to normal, but our family had changed forever. Daniel apologized not only with words, but with actions. He spent more time with me, visited every week, and quietly paid off the remaining balance on Emily's mortgage when she finally bought the small house she had dreamed about for years. Emily never asked him to do it, but he said it was the least he could do after everything she had sacrificed. Looking back, I realized my illness had revealed something far more important than who had money. It revealed who truly understood the meaning of family. My daughter never became rich, yet she was the wealthiest person I knew because her heart was filled with love, compassion, and gratitude. My son eventually rebuilt my trust, but he often admitted that refusing to help me was the greatest regret of his life. Today, whenever my grandchildren visit, I tell them that success is not measured by luxury homes, expensive cars, or the size of a bank account. Real success is measured by how you treat the people who stood beside you before you had anything. Money can build a beautiful house, but only love can build a real home. In the end, my surgery saved my life, but my daughter's kindness saved our family. Her selfless love reminded all of us that the richest person is not the one who owns the most, but the one who gives the most when it matters most. Lesson: true wealth is never found in a bank account. It is found in a heart that chooses love, sacrifice, and family over money.